Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human cruiser Defiant, watching the enemy ships appear on the main screen. The alien vessels looked like silver knives floating in the darkness of space. Their hulls were smooth and perfect, without any marks or scratches from battle. They moved in perfect formation, like a deadly dance performed by creatures who had fought this way for hundreds of years. Jake had been fighting the Zephyrians for 3 years now. 3 long years of watching human ships get torn apart by energy. Weapons that seemed to come from science fiction movies. The aliens had technology that made human weapons look like toys from a museum. Their laser cannons could cut through steel like butter, and their energy shields could stop almost any attack. The humans threw at them, but Jake had learned something important during those 3 years. He had learned that sometimes the oldest tricks were the best tricks. "Sir, we have incoming transmission from the Zephyrian flagship," said Lieutenant Amy Walsh from her position at the communications station. Amy was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. She had joined the fleet right out of the academy, and this was her first real battle. "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. The main display flickered. And suddenly they were looking at Captain Amy Rodriguez of the Zephyrian fleet. She was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms that moved in ways that made human stomachs turn. Her black eyes were cold and empty, like looking into deep space. When she spoke, her voice came through the universal translator as smooth and mocking. "Primitive humans," Rodriguez said, her alien mouth clicking and whistling in her own language. "Still carrying your barbaric bullet weapons while the rest of the galaxy has moved to civilized energy combat. Today you will learn why evolution left your species behind." Jake had heard this speech before. Zephyrians loved to talk about how advanced they were. They loved to remind humans that their technology was thousands of years old while humans had only been in space for a few centuries. They thought it made them superior. "Your crude projectile weapons cannot harm our energy shields," Rodriguez continued. "Your primitive thinking cannot match our tactical systems. Today we will show you what real warfare looks like." The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent. Jake looked around at his crew. They were all young, all scared, but they were also ready. Lieutenant Ben Parker sat at the weapons station, his fingers dancing over the controls. Ben was a big man with red hair and freckles, and he had been with Jake since the beginning of the war. He knew the ship's weapons better than anyone. "All weapons ready, sir," Ben reported. "Laser batteries at full power." "Railguns loaded and ready to fire," Jake nodded. The railguns were what the Zephyrians called primitive. They were magnetic cannons that fired solid metal bullets at incredible speed. The aliens laughed at them because they thought energy weapons were better. They had been laughing for 3 years. "Lieutenant Chun, sensor report," Jake called to the woman at the science. Station Lisa Chun was quiet and smart, with long black hair and thick glasses. She had been studying the Zephyrian ships for months, looking for weaknesses that others had missed. "Enemy fleet consists of 12 ships, sir. 3 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 3 support vessels. They are maintaining standard formation. Pattern Delta 7. Jake smiled. Pattern Delta 7. The Zephyrians used the same attack patterns in every battle. They were so confident in their technology that they never bothered to change their tactics. That was going to be their first mistake. "Their shields are running at standard frequency," Lisa continued. "Same rotation pattern as always, 47-second cycles exactly." That was going to be their second mistake. Jake walked to the front of the bridge and looked out at the approaching enemy fleet. The Zephyrian ships were beautiful in their own way. They looked like works of art, all curves and flowing lines. Human ships were different. They were built for function, not beauty. They were covered in armor plating and weapon mounts and sensor arrays. They looked like what they were, machines built for war. "Sir, the enemy is charging their weapons," reported Danny Cooper from the tactical station. Danny was the youngest member of the crew, barely 21, but he had good eyes and quick reflexes. "They will be in firing range in 2 minutes." Jake nodded. 2 minutes. That was enough time to make sure his crew was ready. He had trained them for this moment. They had practiced the plan dozens of times, but this would be the first time they used it in real combat. "All stations, prepare for battle," Jake announced. "Remember what we practiced. Stay calm, follow orders, and trust your training." The Zephyrians think they know everything about human warfare, but they are about to learn something new. The crew worked quickly and quietly. Ben checked the railgun targeting systems one more time. Amy opened communication channels to the rest of the human fleet. Lisa monitored the enemy ships, watching for any changes in their formation. Danny prepared the defensive systems. Jake thought about the first time he had seen a Zephyrian ship. It had been 3 years ago, during the Battle of Proxima Station. The human fleet had been destroyed in less than an hour. The Zephyrian energy weapons had cut through human armor like it was made of paper. Their shields had stopped every human weapon that was fired at them. After that battle, the surviving human commanders had held a meeting. They had to find a way to fight back against the superior alien technology. Some people wanted to try to build better energy weapons. Others wanted to find allies among the other alien species. But Jake had a different idea. Instead of trying to match the Zephyrians' technology for technology, why not use something they had never seen before? Something so old and simple that they would never expect it? 1 minute to weapons range, Danny announced. Jake took a deep breath. 3 years of planning had led to this moment. 3 years of letting the Zephyrians think they understood human capabilities. 3 years of carefully studying every battle, every engagement, every alien tactic. The Zephyrians had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that because human technology was older, it was weaker. They had forgotten that sometimes the simple solution was the best solution. "All ships, this is Morrison," Jake said into his communication headset. "Remember the plan? Let them fire first. Wait for my signal. And remember why we are here." The human fleet spread out into battle formation. 12 human ships against 12 Zephyrian ships. On paper, it should have been an easy victory for the aliens. Their weapons were more powerful, their shields were stronger, and their technology was more advanced. But Jake knew something the Zephyrians did not know. He knew that in war, the best weapon was not always the most advanced weapon. Sometimes, the best weapon was the one your enemy had forgotten how to defend against. The battle was about to begin, and the Zephyrians were about to learn why humans still carried bullets in a laser war. The space between the two fleets suddenly filled with brilliant beams of light. The Zephyrians fired first, just as Jake had expected. Their laser cannons sent streams of pure energy across the darkness, lighting up the void like deadly rainbows. The beams struck the human ships and scattered into millions of sparkling fragments as they hit the energy shields. Jake watched from the bridge of the Defiant as the familiar dance of space combat began. The Zephyrian ships moved in their perfect formation, weaving back and forth in patterns they had used for decades. Their captains had learned these moves in their military academies, practiced them in countless training exercises, and used them to win hundreds of battles. "Return fire," Jake ordered calmly. The human fleet responded with their own laser weapons. Beams of concentrated light lanced out from the human ships, striking the Zephyrian vessels and dispersing harmlessly against their energy shields. The aliens' defensive systems were designed to handle energy attacks, and they worked perfectly. Every human laser blast was absorbed or deflected without causing any damage. Lieutenant Ben Parker's hands moved steadily over his weapon controls. "Direct hits on 3 enemy vessels, sir. No damage to their shields." His voice was calm, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. Ben had been through this before. They all had. The two fleets continued their deadly dance, moving in slow circles around each other while exchanging laser fire. To anyone watching, it would look like a normal space battle. The humans were doing exactly what the Zephyrians expected them to do. They were fighting with energy weapons, trying to break through the alien shields with brute force. But Jake was not watching the laser show. He was watching the clock. "Lieutenant Chun, confirm the shield rotation pattern," he said quietly. "Lisa." Chen bent over her sensor display, her eyes focused on the streams of data flowing across her screen. Pattern confirmed, sir. The Zephyrion shields are cycling through their standard frequency rotation. 47 seconds per complete cycle. Just like always, Jake nodded. The Zephyrions had never changed their shield patterns in 3 years of war. Why would they? Their shields worked perfectly against human energy weapons. They saw no reason to improve something that already gave them total protection. Their confidence was about to become their weakness. Time until the next vulnerable window? Jake asked. 32 seconds, sir, Lisa replied. Jake opened the communication channel to the rest of the human fleet. All ships, this is Morrison. Continue standard laser fire. Make it look good. Wait for my signal. The battle continued around them. More laser beams filled the space between the fleets. The Zephyrian ships fired their weapons with deadly precision, their energy blasts striking human vessels and causing minor damage to shields and armor. The human ships returned fire, their lasers creating brilliant light shows that accomplished nothing. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communication system. Pathetic humans! Your weak weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. Surrender. Now, and we will make your deaths quick. Jake smiled grimly. Rodriguez was so confident in her technology that she could not imagine the humans had any other plan. She saw the laser fire and assumed that was all the humans could do. She had no idea that every human ship in the fleet was carrying something that could punch through her shields like they were made of paper. 20 seconds, Lisa announced quietly. Jake looked around his bridge. Every member of his crew was ready. Amy Walsh had her communication systems prepared to coordinate the attack. Ben Parker had his targeting computers locked onto the Zephyrian flagship. Danny Cooper was monitoring the defensive systems, ready to protect the Defiant from return. Fire. The laser battle continued above them, but Jake was thinking about physics. The Zephyrions had developed their shields to handle energy weapons. They could absorb laser beams, deflect plasma bolts, and disperse particle beams. Their technology was perfect for the kind of warfare that dominated the galaxy, but there was one thing their shields could not handle. Something so simple that the advanced aliens had forgotten it existed. 15 seconds, Lisa said. Jake remembered his training at the Earth Military Academy. His instructors had taught him about the history of warfare, about how every defensive system eventually met a weapon that could defeat it. Castle walls fell to cannons. Armor was pierced by bullets. Energy shields could be bypassed by kinetic weapons. The Zephyrians had spent centuries perfecting their energy warfare. They had become so good at it that they had forgotten about everything else. They had never bothered to defend against solid projectiles because no civilized species used such primitive weapons. 10 seconds, Lisa announced. Jake felt his heart beating faster. 3 years of careful planning had led to this moment. 3 years of studying Zephyrian tactics, learning their patterns, and waiting for the right opportunity. The aliens thought they knew everything about human capabilities. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 5 seconds, Lisa said. The Zephyrian ships continued their attack, their laser cannons firing steady streams of energy at the human fleet. Their shields rotated through their program frequencies, protecting them from the human energy weapons. Captain Rodriguez was probably laughing at the pathetic human attempts to damage her ships. 3 seconds, Lisa whispered. Jake took a deep breath. The moment had arrived. The Zephyrions were about to learn why humans still carried bullets in a laser war. 2 seconds. On the main screen, Jake could see the Zephyrian flagship. It was a beautiful ship, all flowing curves and elegant lines. Its energy shields shimmered around it like a soap bubble, deflecting every laser beam that struck it. The ship seemed invincible, untouchable. 1 second. Jake opened the fleet communication channel. All ships, this is Morrison. The shields are cycling to vulnerable frequency. Prepare railguns for kinetic bombardment. The human fleet continued firing their lasers, but now they were also preparing their secret weapons. In the weapon bays of every human ship, magnetic railguns were powering up. These were not energy weapons. They were kinetic weapons, designed to fire solid metal projectiles at incredible speed. "Mark," Jake said quietly. Lisa looked up from her sensor station. "Shield frequency rotation complete, sir. The Zephyrian shields are now at their most vulnerable point." Jake smiled. The Zephyrians had no idea what was coming. Their shields were designed to handle energy, not matter. They could stop a laser beam, but they could not stop a chunk of metal moving at relativistic speed. "All ships," Jake said into his communicator. "This is Morrison. Execute kinetic bombardment. Fire rail guns on my mark." The human fleet was ready. Hundreds of depleted uranium rounds sat in magnetic launching tubes waiting to be fired. Each round weighed several kilograms and would travel at a significant fraction of the speed of light. When they hit the Zephyrian ships, they would not be stopped by energy shields. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the communication system one more time. "Foolish humans. Your primitive projectiles cannot penetrate our energy barriers. You waste your ammunition on impossible attacks." Jake looked at the Zephyrian flagship on his screen. In a few seconds, Rodriguez would learn just how wrong she was. The aliens were about to discover that sometimes the oldest weapons were the deadliest weapons. "Mark," Jake said clearly. The human fleet fired as one. Hundreds of metal rounds streaked across space toward the Zephyrian ships. The aliens' perfect energy shields, designed to stop the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, were about to meet something they had never been designed to handle: simple, primitive, deadly bullets. The first railgun round hit the Zephyrian flagship exactly 3 seconds after Jake gave the order to fire. The depleted uranium projectile, traveling at nearly 1/3 the speed of light, struck the alien ship's energy shield and passed through it like it was not even there. The shield that had stopped thousands of laser blasts could not even slow down. A simple piece of metal moving at incredible speed, the round punched through the flagship's hull with a sound like thunder. Metal tore apart as if it were paper. The projectile carved a hole straight through the ship from front to back, destroying everything in its path. Alien crew members who had been confident in their invincibility just moments before were suddenly face to face with the reality of human warfare. Jake watched on the main screen as the elegant Zephyrian flagship shuddered from the impact. Atmosphere vented from the holes in its hull, creating streams of glowing gas that sparkled in the starlight. Emergency lights began flashing along the ship's surface as damage control systems tried to deal with destruction they had never been designed to handle. "Direct hit on the flagship," Lieutenant Ben Parker reported, his voice filled with amazement. The railgun round went straight through their shields, no resistance at all. But the first round was just the beginning. The human fleet had fired hundreds of projectiles, and they were all finding their targets. Across the Zephyrian formation, the same scene was playing out again and again. Energy shields that had seemed invincible were proving completely useless against solid matter. The second round hit the flagship's engine section. The depleted uranium projectile tore through the ship's fusion reactor like a knife through butter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the reactor containment failed, and the entire back half of the ship disappeared in a brilliant flash of nuclear fire. Captain Rodriguez had just enough time to realize what was happening before her ship exploded. The woman who had mocked human technology for 3 years died in the light of her own reactor, destroyed by a weapon she had considered too primitive to worry about. "The flagship is gone," Lieutenant Lisa Chun announced from her sensor station. "Complete destruction, no survivors." Jake nodded grimly. He took no pleasure in the death of enemy soldiers, but Rodriguez had made her choice when she decided to attack human colonies. This was war, and in war, the smarter side usually won. All around the battlefield, the Zephyrian ships were learning the same lesson. The destroyer Vanguard took 3 railgun rounds to its central hull and broke apart like a toy hit by a hammer. The cruiser Starwind lost its entire weapon section to a single uranium round that severed all power cables and control systems. The support vessel Nebula Runner simply vanished when a projectile hit its ammunition storage. The aliens had spent centuries perfecting their energy warfare. They had built shields that could stop any laser, deflect any plasma bolt, and absorb any particle beam. But they had never thought to defend against something as simple as a fast-moving piece of metal. "Sir, we are receiving emergency transmissions from the surviving Zephyrian ships," reported Lieutenant Amy Walsh from the communications station. "They are trying to modify their shields to stop kinetic weapons." Jake almost smiled. "The Zephyrians were trying to adapt their technology in the middle of a battle. It was too little, too late. Their shields were designed from the ground up to handle energy weapons. You could not simply reprogram them to stop physical objects." "It will not work," said Lisa Chun, monitoring the alien ships with her sensors. "Their shield generators create energy fields that disperse coherent light and charged particles. They cannot create a barrier that will stop solid matter. The physics are completely different." Lieutenant Danny Cooper looked up from his tactical display. "Sir, the remaining Zephyrian ships are trying to retreat. They are moving away from our formation at maximum speed." Jake opened the communication channel to the human fleet. "All ships, continue firing. Do not let them escape. We need to make sure they understand the lesson we are teaching them." The human railguns continued to fire. The magnetic launchers could reload and fire much faster than the aliens expected. While energy weapons needed time to recharge their power cells, kinetic weapons just needed more ammunition. And the humans had brought plenty of ammunition. The Zephyrian cruiser Moonbeam tried to escape by using its superior speed, but railgun rounds traveled much faster than any ship could move. 3 uranium projectiles caught the cruiser as it fled, tearing through its hull and destroying its main engines. The ship went dark and began tumbling through space like a broken toy. Commander Jake Morrison watched the destruction with mixed feelings. Part of him was proud that the human plan had worked so perfectly. His crew had performed exactly as they had been trained, and they had achieved a victory that would be remembered for generations. But another part of him felt sorry for the Zephyrian crews who were dying because their leaders had been too arrogant to respect human intelligence. "Sir, the destroyer Nightfall is trying to surrender," Amy Walsh reported. "They are broadcasting a white flag signal on all frequencies." Jake considered this. The Zephyrians had never surrendered before. In 3 years of war, they had always fought to the death rather than give up to what they considered an inferior species. This was something new. "Accept their surrender," Jake ordered, "but keep our weapons locked on them." This might be a trick. The battle was winding down. Of the 12 Zephyrian ships that had started the fight, only 3 were still intact. The others were either destroyed completely or so badly damaged that they could not continue fighting. The perfect alien formation had been shattered by weapons. The aliens had considered too primitive to worry about. Ben Parker checked his weapons display. "Sir, we still have plenty of railgun ammunition. Should we continue the attack?" Jake shook his head. "No, we have made our point. Let the survivors carry word back to their commanders. Let them tell the Zephyrian High Command what happened here today." The human fleet began to regroup, their ships forming a protective circle around the disabled Zephyrian vessels. Medical teams prepared to help wounded alien crew members because that was what humans did. Even in war, they tried to save lives when they could. Lieutenant Lisa Chun was studying the sensor readings from the battle. "Sir, I am detecting escape pods from several of the destroyed ships. Zephyrian survivors are evacuating." "Rescue them," Jake ordered immediately. "All ships, begin search and rescue operations. We are not murderers, we are soldiers." As the human crews began saving alien lives, Jake thought about what this battle meant for the future of the war. The Zephyrians would never again underestimate human capabilities. They would never again assume that older technology was weaker technology. They had learned that humans were not primitive savages who could be easily defeated. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had been holding back for 3 years, studying their enemies and waiting for the right moment to strike. The Zephyrians had mocked human bullets, but those bullets had just won the most important battle of the war. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over. The age of human ingenuity had begun. On the bridge of the Defiant, Jake Morrison looked out at the stars and allowed himself a small smile. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The Zephyrians would adapt, they would learn, and they would come back stronger, but humans would be ready for them. Because humans had learned the most important lesson of all: the best weapon is not always the most advanced weapon. Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming. The three surviving Zephyrian ships turned away from the battlefield and began running at full speed. Their engines burned bright blue against the darkness of space as they tried to escape the human fleet. For the first time in 3 years of war, the aliens were retreating from human forces. Commander Jake Morrison watched the fleeing ships on his main screen. The elegant vessels that had looked so confident just minutes before were now damaged and desperate. One of them was trailing atmosphere from hull breaches. Another was flying with only half its engine power. The third was broadcasting distress. "Signals on every frequency? Sir, should we pursue them?" asked Lieutenant Ben Parker from the weapons station. His fingers hovered over the railgun controls, ready to fire more uranium rounds at the retreating aliens. Jake considered the question carefully. The human fleet had won a great victory, but the war was far from over. These surviving ships would carry word back to the Zephyrian High Command about what had happened here. That information could be useful or dangerous, depending on how the humans handled it. "Yes, but keep our distance," Jake ordered. "I want them to know we can catch them if we choose to. But I also want them to survive long enough to tell their commanders what they learned here today." The human fleet began to follow the retreating Zephyrians. The human ships were not as fast as the alien vessels, but they had something better than speed. They had weapons that could hit targets from much farther away than energy weapons could reach. Lieutenant Lisa Chun monitored the fleeing ships with her sensors. "Sir, the Zephyrian destroyer Stormwind is trying to modify its shields while running. They are attempting to create some kind of kinetic barrier." Jake almost felt sorry for the aliens. They were trying to solve a problem that had no solution. Their entire shield technology was based on manipulating energy fields. You could not simply reprogram an energy shield to stop physical objects. It was like trying to use a flashlight to stop a bullet. "It will not work," said Lieutenant Danny Cooper from the tactical station. "Their shield generators cannot create a solid barrier. They can only manipulate electromagnetic fields and particle flows." The human fleet continued its pursuit, staying just close enough to keep the Zephyrians worried. Jake opened a communication channel to the other human ships. "All vessels, maintain pursuit formation. Fire a few rounds to keep them motivated. But do not destroy them. We want witnesses." The human railguns fired again. This time, Jake was not trying to destroy the enemy ships. He was making a point. The uranium rounds streaked past the fleeing Zephyrians, close enough to scare them, but not close enough to hit them. The message was clear: "We can kill you whenever we want to." One of the railgun rounds passed within 50 meters of the Zephyrian cruiser Starfall. The alien ship immediately changed course, turning away from the human fleet at an even sharper angle. The captain of that ship had just realized that the humans were playing with them. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian ship Moonlight," reported Lieutenant Amy Walsh. "They are asking for terms of surrender?" Jake shook his head. "Tell them we are not interested in their surrender right now. Tell them to keep running and to remember what they saw here today." The pursuit continued for another hour. The human fleet followed the Zephyrians across 3 star systems, always staying just close enough to remind them who was in control. Every few minutes, the railguns would fire another round, always missing but always making the aliens jump. During the chase, Jake received reports from his other commanders. Commander Ryan Torres of the destroyer Vigilant had been monitoring alien communication frequencies. "Sir, the Zephyrians are sending emergency broadcasts to their home fleet. They are reporting that human kinetic weapons can penetrate their shields." Captain Claire Martinez of the heavy cruiser Defender had been analyzing the battle data. "Sir, our railguns performed even better than expected. The alien shields provided 0 resistance to kinetic impacts. I estimate we can defeat any Zephyrian ship in their fleet using these weapons. Jake nodded. The battle had proven that human strategy was superior to alien technology. But he also knew that the Zephyrians would not give up easily. They would try to adapt to find new ways to defend against human weapons. The war was entering a new phase. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting a large Zephyrian fleet approaching, Lisa Chun announced. At least 30 ships, including several heavy battle cruisers. They will be here in approximately 6 hours, Jake smiled grimly. The Zephyrian reinforcements were coming, probably hoping to rescue their retreating ships and to see for themselves what had happened in the battle. They were about to get a demonstration of human capabilities that they would never forget. All ships, prepare for extended combat operations, Jake ordered. Load all rail guns with full ammunition. We are about to teach a much larger lesson to a much larger class. The 3 surviving Zephyrian ships finally escaped into hyperspace, their faster-than-light engines carrying them away from the human fleet. But they carried with them something more valuable than their lives: information. Information about human weapons, human tactics, and human determination. Back on the Defiant, Jake gathered his senior officers for a briefing. The bridge crew sat around the main conference table, their faces showing the mixture of pride and exhaustion that came after a successful battle. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake began, today we proved that human ingenuity can defeat alien technology. But this is just the beginning. The Zephyrians will study what happened here. They will try to develop new defenses. They will adapt their tactics. Lieutenant Ben Parker leaned forward. Sir, what can they do? Their shields cannot stop kinetic weapons. The physics do not allow it, Jake nodded. That is true. But they might try other approaches. They might use armor instead of shields. They might try to destroy our railgun ammunition before we can fire it. They might attack our ships from longer range where their energy weapons can still be effective. Lisa Chun spoke up. Sir, I have been analyzing the battle data. The Zephyrians have been using the same tactics for decades. They have become so specialized in energy warfare that they have forgotten how to fight any other way. That is their weakness, Jake agreed. They think there is only one way to fight a space battle. But humans have always been generalists. We use whatever weapon works best for the situation. The briefing continued for another hour. Jake and his officers discussed plans for the next phase of the war. They talked about how to use their new advantage, how to spread the word to other human fleets, and how to prepare for the Zephyrian counterattack that would surely come. As the meeting ended, Jake looked out at the stars through the bridge windows. Somewhere out there, the 3 surviving Zephyrian ships were racing back to their home base. They would tell their commanders about the battle, about the human railguns, about the day their invincible shields failed them. The news would spread quickly through the Zephyrian fleet. Ship captains who had been confident in their superiority would suddenly realize that they were vulnerable. Crews who had laughed at human technology would start to fear human weapons. The psychological impact might be even more important than the military victory, but Jake knew that the real test was still coming. The Zephyrians would not give up after one defeat. They would send more ships, better ships, ships prepared to fight against kinetic weapons. The humans had won the first round of a new kind of war, but there would be many more rounds to come. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were not the primitive species that everyone thought they were. They were going to learn that sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and they were going to learn that you should never underestimate the species that still carried bullets in a laser war. The word was spreading, and soon everyone would know. The humans were no longer running from the aliens. The aliens were running from the humans. 3 weeks after the battle, Commander Jake Morrison stood in the same place on the bridge of the Defiant, but everything had changed. The human fleet was no longer running from alien ships. Instead, alien ships were running from human fleets. The news of the battle had spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and suddenly every species was looking at humanity with new eyes. Lieutenant Danny Cooper was reading the latest intelligence reports from across human space. Sir, we have confirmation from 12 different sectors. Zephyrian fleets are withdrawing from human territory. They are pulling back to their core worlds and setting up defensive positions. Jake nodded. The psychological impact of the battle had been even greater than he had hoped. The Zephyrians had built their entire military strategy around the idea that their technology was superior to everyone else's. When that technology failed them, their confidence collapsed with it. What? About the other alien species? Jake asked. Lieutenant Lisa Chun looked up from her communication station. Sir, we are receiving diplomatic messages from the Andromedan Council, the Vega Alliance, and even the Centauri Republic. They all want to establish formal relations with Earth. Jake almost smiled. For 3 years, those same alien governments had refused to talk to humanity. They had considered humans too primitive, too backward, too weak to be worth their attention. Now they were sending ambassadors and peace envoys, all because humans had proven that old weapons could still win new wars. Lieutenant Amy Walsh was monitoring the communication channels. Sir, we are also receiving messages from human colonies across the frontier. They are reporting that alien raids have stopped completely. The Zephyrians are no longer attacking civilian targets. That was the news Jake had been waiting for. The whole point of the war had been to protect human civilians from alien attacks. If the Zephyrians were no longer raiding human colonies, then the strategy had worked. The battle had not just been a military victory. It had been a diplomatic victory as well. Sir, incoming priority message from Earth Command, Amy announced. Jake straightened up. Earth Command was the central military authority for all human forces. They had been fighting a losing war for 3 years, watching their fleets get destroyed by superior alien technology. This message would tell him how the victory was being received back home. Put it on screen, Jake ordered. The main display flickered, and suddenly Jake was looking at Admiral Patricia Stone, the commander of Earth's space forces. Admiral Stone was an older woman with gray hair and sharp blue eyes. She had been Jake's commanding officer when he was just a lieutenant, and she had taught him many of the lessons that had made the victory possible. Commander Morrison, Admiral, Stone said, and Jake could hear the pride in her voice. I have just finished reading your battle report. Outstanding work. The Joint Chiefs are calling this the most important military victory in human history. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. The battle had been a gamble, a desperate attempt to find a way to fight back against superior alien technology. If it had failed, his entire crew would have been dead, and the human war effort would have been set back by years. Thank you, Admiral, Jake replied, but this is just the beginning. The Zephyrians will adapt. They will find new ways to fight us. Admiral Stone nodded. I agree, but they will never again underestimate human capabilities. You have changed the entire nature of this war. The enemy now knows that humans are not primitive savages. They know that we are intelligent, resourceful, and dangerous. The communication ended, and Jake looked around at his bridge crew. These young men and women had helped him win the most important battle of their lives. They had trusted his strategy, followed his orders, and proven that human courage could overcome alien arrogance. Lieutenant Ben Parker was still monitoring the weapon systems. Sir, we are receiving requests from other human fleets. They want to know how to modify their ships to carry railguns. Everyone wants to use kinetic weapons now. Jake nodded. The victory would spread throughout the human fleet. Every ship would be equipped with railguns. Every crew would be trained in kinetic warfare. The Zephyrians would never again face humans, who were limited to energy weapons. Sir, I have been analyzing the tactical data from the battle, Lisa Chun reported. The Zephyrians made several critical errors. They used the same formation patterns they had been using for decades. They never varied their shield frequencies. They assumed that their technology would protect them. Jake walked to the front of the bridge and looked out at the stars. They made the same mistake that every overconfident enemy has made throughout human history. They stopped learning. They stopped adapting. They thought that because their technology was advanced, They did not need to think about tactics. That was the real lesson of the battle. Technology was just a tool. The species that used their tools most intelligently would always defeat the species that relied on their tools to do their thinking for them. The Zephyrians had forgotten that lesson, and it had cost them their advantage. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian High Command," Amy Walsh announced. "They are requesting a meeting to discuss terms for ending the war." Jake felt a moment of satisfaction. The Zephyrians wanted to negotiate. After 3 years of treating humans like animals, they were finally ready to talk as equals. The battle had earned humanity something more valuable than victory. It had earned them respect. "Tell them we will consider their request," Jake said. "But the terms will be discussed by our diplomats, not our military commanders. This is no longer just a war. It is a chance to establish a new relationship between our species." Over the following weeks, news of the battle continued to spread throughout the galaxy. The story grew with each telling, but the core message remained the same. The humans had defeated superior alien technology using weapons that everyone had considered obsolete. The galaxy was learning that humanity was not the primitive species that everyone had believed. Other alien species began to study human history, trying to understand how such a young civilization had developed such effective military strategies. They learned about human wars, human weapons, and human tactics. They discovered that humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years, and that all of that experience had taught them lessons that more advanced species had forgotten. The Andromedan Council sent a team of military historians to study the battle. The Vega Alliance began developing their own kinetic weapons. The Centauri Republic started reviewing their own defensive systems, looking for weaknesses that they had never considered before. But the most important change was not military or technological. It was psychological. The galaxy had learned that advancement was not just about having the newest technology. It was about understanding how to use whatever technology you had most effectively. Jake Morrison had started the war as the commander of a single human ship, fighting a desperate battle against impossible odds. He ended it as the architect of a new era in galactic warfare. The battle had proven that humans belonged among the great civilizations of the galaxy, not as junior partners or conquered subjects, but as equals. The day the aliens learned why humans still carry bullets in a laser war was the day the galaxy learned to respect humanity. And that respect would shape the future of every species among the stars. The war was over. The age of human equality had begun. And somewhere in the darkness of space, new human ships were being built, each one carrying both the most advanced energy weapons and the most primitive kinetic weapons, because humans had learned the most important lesson of all: the best weapon is always the one that works.